Rain hammered down like bullets on Sarah Mitchell's old pickup truck. Her windshield wipers struggled against the downpour as she squinted through the glass, trying to see the road ahead. It was almost midnight, and all she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. "Just 3 more miles," she mumbled to herself, gripping the steering wheel tighter as thunder cracked overhead. Sarah had just finished a 14-hour shift at her auto repair shop. Her back ached, her eyes burned, and motor oil was caked under her fingernails, despite her best efforts to scrub it away. The shop, Mitchell's Auto Repair, had been her father's life's work, and now it was hers. Or at least it would be until the end of the month if she couldn't come up with the money to pay off the mounting pile of debts. The final notice from the bank sat crumpled in her jacket pocket. 3 weeks to come up with $15,000, or they would foreclose. 3 weeks to save the only thing she had left of her dad. Lightning flashed, illuminating the road ahead, and that's when she saw it. A sleek black car pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly in the storm. Even through the rain, she could tell it was expensive. Too expensive for this rural stretch of highway. Sarah slowed down, her mechanic's instincts taking over. She should keep driving. She was tired, wet, and in no mood for company. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Never leave someone stranded on the road, Sarah Bear. That could be you someday." With a sigh, she pulled over behind the car and grabbed her small emergency toolkit from under the seat. She recognized the vehicle as she approached, a Bentley Continental, worth more than her house and business combined. A man sat in the driver's seat, his silhouette visible through the rain-streaked windows. He appeared to be talking angrily into a phone. Sarah tapped on the window, and he jumped, startled by her sudden appearance. The window lowered with a smooth electronic hum, revealing a man in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. His tailored suit probably cost more than Sarah made in a month. "Car trouble?" she asked, rain dripping from her baseball cap. The man looked her up and down, taking in her oil-stained work shirt with Mitchell's Auto Repair embroidered on the pocket. His expression shifted from surprise to relief. "Engine died about 20 minutes ago," he said. "I've called my driver, but he's at least an hour away." Sarah nodded. "Mind if I take a look? I'm a mechanic." The man seemed to hesitate, then pressed a button to pop the hood. Sarah moved to the front of the car and lifted it, using her small flashlight to inspect the engine. "I'm Sarah, by the way," she called out as she worked. "Richard?" the man replied simply, not offering a last name. After a few minutes of inspection, Sarah spotted the problem: a blown fuse and some water damage to the electrical system. Nothing she couldn't fix temporarily. "I can get you going again," she said, returning to his window. "It'll get you home, but you should still have it properly checked out tomorrow." Richard nodded. "Please, go ahead." Sarah worked quickly, her experienced hands making the temporary repair despite the rain soaking through her clothes. When she finished, she closed the hood and returned to his window. "Try it now," she instructed. The engine purred to life on the first try. Richard's face lit up with a genuine smile that transformed his serious features. "You're a lifesaver," he said, reaching for his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Sarah waved her hand. "Don't worry about it. Just helping out a stranded motorist." "I insist," Richard said, holding out several $100 bills. Sarah shook her head. "Seriously, it's fine. If you really want to repay me, bring your car to my shop tomorrow for a proper fix." She pulled a soggy business card from her pocket and handed it to him. "First customer discount," she added with a tired smile. Richard took the card, studying it for a moment. "Mitchell's Auto Repair, on Oakwood Drive." "That's the one," Sarah confirmed, wondering why he sounded surprised. "And your last name is Mitchell?" "Yes, inherited from my dad. He passed away last year." She wasn't sure why she was sharing this with a stranger. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "Was your father's name James Mitchell?" Sarah stiffened, suddenly alert despite her exhaustion. "How did you know that?" "Lucky guess," Richard said quickly, but his expression suggested otherwise. His gaze dropped to her hand, where a simple gold band with an intricate pattern glinted on her finger. It wasn't on her wedding finger, but her right hand. The color drained from Richard's face. "That ring," he whispered, his composed demeanor crumbling. "Where did you get it?" Sarah instinctively covered the ring with her other hand. "It was my mother's, the only thing I have of hers." "Why?" Richard's hands were trembling now. He gripped the steering wheel to steady them, but Sarah had already noticed. "I'm sorry," he said, regaining his composure with visible effort. "It just reminds me of something I once saw." Before Sarah could question him further, he pressed a business card into her hand. Unlike her soggy paper card, his was thick, cream-colored cardstock with embossed lettering. "Richard Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood Enterprises," she read aloud, recognition dawning on her face. Blackwood Enterprises owned half the businesses in the state. She was standing in the rain, talking to a billionaire. "Please, take this," Richard said, pushing the cash toward her again. "And I'll definitely bring the car to your shop tomorrow." This time, Sarah took the money, too confused and tired to argue further. As she stepped back from the car, Richard added, "That ring, it's very special. Take good care of it." With that cryptic comment, he rolled up his window and drove away, leaving Sarah standing in the rain, clutching $500 and feeling like she'd just missed something important. The next morning, Sarah arrived at her shop earlier than usual. She hadn't slept well, Richard Blackwood's strange reaction to her mother's ring playing on her mind. The ring was her most treasured possession, a unique gold band with an intricate pattern that her father had given her on her 18th birthday. "Your mother wanted you to have this," he'd said, his eyes filled with the same sadness they always held when he spoke of her mom. Sarah's mother had died when she was just a baby. She had no memories of her, just stories from her father and a handful of photographs. The ring was her only tangible connection to the woman who had given her life. The shop was quiet as she unlocked the front door. Bills and final notices were piled on the desk, a physical reminder of her failing business. Her father had been a great mechanic, but a terrible businessman. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, Sarah had discovered just how bad the shop's finances really were. The bell above the door jingled, pulling Sarah from her thoughts. She turned, expecting to see her employee, Mike, but instead found herself face-to-face with Richard Blackwood. He was dressed more casually today in slacks and a button-down shirt, but still exuded wealth and power. "Good morning," he said, his voice controlled and professional, very different from his emotional reaction the night before. "I hope I'm not too early." "No, not at all," Sarah replied, suddenly conscious of her messy ponytail and the dark circles under her eyes. "I didn't expect you to actually come." "I always keep my word," Richard said. He glanced around the small, aging shop with undisguised interest. "How long have you owned this place?" "Since my dad died last year," Sarah answered, leading him to her small office. "But it's been in our family for 30 years. Richard nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "And it's just you running it now?" "Me and Mike, my part-time helper. He's in college, studying engineering." Sarah offered Richard a seat and coffee, which he accepted. As she poured him a cup, she noticed he was staring at the photographs on her desk, particularly one of her father standing in front of the shop on its opening day. "Your father," Richard said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, that's him, James Mitchell." Sarah handed Richard the coffee and sat across from him. "Mr. Blackwood, I get the feeling you didn't just come here about your car. Did you know my father?" Richard's fingers tightened around the coffee mug. After a long moment, he looked directly into Sarah's eyes. "Yes, I knew James, many years ago." He set down his coffee and leaned forward. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because of your ring. And your mother." Sarah's heart began to race. "My mother? What about her? What did your father tell you about her? Richard asked carefully. Not much. Her name was Elizabeth. They met young, fell in love, got married. She died after I was born. Complications from childbirth. Sarah touched the ring on her finger, a habit when she was anxious. Dad didn't like talking about her. It was too painful. Richard's expression was unreadable. Sarah, what I'm about to tell you might be difficult to hear, but I believe you deserve the truth. He took a deep breath. Your mother's name wasn't Elizabeth. It was Rebecca Collins, and she didn't die in childbirth. The world seemed to stop around Sarah. What? No, that's not... My dad wouldn't lie about something like that. He was protecting you, Richard said gently. And her? From what? From whom? Sarah demanded, anger rising to mask her confusion. From me, Richard answered, his voice barely above a whisper. Your mother was my fiancée 25 years ago. That ring on your finger, I designed it for her. There were only 2 ever made. Sarah's coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She barely noticed the hot liquid soaking into her work boots. That's impossible, she whispered, her voice trembling. My mother died. There's a grave. I've put flowers on it every year on my birthday. Richard's eyes softened with what looked like genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, Sarah. I don't know what your father told you, but Rebecca Collins didn't die 24 years ago. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the concrete floor. I think you should leave. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but... Your mother had a small birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon behind her right ear, Richard interrupted. She loved blueberry pancakes, but was allergic to strawberries. She could play the piano beautifully, but couldn't sing a note in tune. And she had a laugh that could light up a room. Sarah froze. Her father had told her these exact details about her mother over the years, precious fragments of information she had collected and treasured like rare gems. How do you know all that? She asked, her anger giving way to confusion. Richard pulled out his wallet and carefully removed an old folded photograph. He handed it to Sarah without a word. With shaking hands, Sarah unfolded it. The photograph showed a younger Richard, standing with his arm around a beautiful woman with wild curly hair and a bright smile. She was wearing a simple white sundress, and on her right hand was the exact same ring Sarah now wore. The background showed a beach at sunset. That was taken in Malibu 25 years ago, Richard said quietly. 2 weeks before our engagement party. Sarah stared at the woman in the photo. It was like looking at an older version of herself. The same eyes, the same smile, even the same dimple on the left cheek. There was no denying the resemblance. I don't understand, Sarah said, sinking back into her chair. If she didn't die, then where has she been all these years? Why would Dad lie? Richard ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking much older than he had the night before. It's a long and complicated story, Sarah. One I've spent 24 years trying to forget. The bell above the shop door jingled again, and Mike walked in, stopping short when he saw the tension in the room and the broken mug on the floor. Everything okay, boss? He asked, looking suspiciously at Richard. Fine, Mike, Sarah said, composing herself. Can you handle the shop for a bit? Mr. Blackwood and I need to talk privately. Mike nodded, though he cast another wary glance at Richard before heading into the garage area. Once he was gone, Sarah looked at Richard. Tell me everything, she demanded. I deserve to know the truth. Richard nodded solemnly. Yes, you do, but not here. He glanced at his watch. I have meetings I can't reschedule today. Have dinner with me tonight at my home, and I promise I'll tell you everything I know. Sarah wanted to refuse, to demand answers immediately, but she could see from Richard's expression that he was serious about his meetings, and part of her needed time to process what she'd already learned. Fine, she agreed reluctantly. What time? 7 o'clock. Richard wrote down an address on the back of another business card. "This is my private residence. Not many people know where I live." Sarah took the card, noting the address was in Highcliffe Estates, the most exclusive neighborhood in the county. "I'll be there." Richard stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Sarah, I want you to know that whatever you may hear tonight, your father was a good man. He loved you very much." The way he spoke about her father in the past tense wasn't lost on Sarah. "I know that," she said firmly. "Nothing you say will change that." Richard gave her a sad smile. "I hope you still feel that way tomorrow." With that, he left, the bell jangling behind him. Sarah stayed frozen in her chair, the photograph still in her hand. The woman who might be her mother smiled up at her, frozen in time, holding the hand of a man who was definitely not James Mitchell. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sarah went through the motions of working, but her mind was elsewhere. By closing time, she had made up her mind. Before meeting Richard for dinner, there was something she needed to do. The cemetery was quiet in the late afternoon. Sarah made her way along the familiar path to the small headstone she had visited countless times before. It was simple grey granite with an inscription that read, "Elizabeth Mitchell, beloved wife and mother 1970-1999, forever in our hearts." Sarah stared at the name, a name she now knew might be a lie. If her mother was Rebecca Collins and was still alive, who was buried here? Was anyone buried here at all? She placed her hand on the cool stone, tears stinging her eyes. "Dad, what did you do?" she whispered. On the drive to Richard's house, Sarah's emotions swung wildly between anger, confusion, and hurt. Her father had been her rock, her hero. The idea that he had constructed such an elaborate lie was almost impossible to accept. Richard's house turned out to be a mansion hidden behind tall iron gates. After identifying herself through an intercom, the gates swung open, and Sarah drove her beat-up pickup truck along a winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured trees. The house itself was modern and imposing, all glass, steel, and stone. As Sarah parked beside a fountain in the circular driveway, she felt painfully out of place in her jeans and clean work shirt, the nicest clothes she had time to change into. A housekeeper met her at the door and led her through the massive house to a terrace overlooking a swimming pool and the city lights beyond. Richard was waiting for her, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Sarah," he greeted her, setting his drink down. "Thank you for coming. Would you like something to drink?" "Just water," she replied, taking in the spectacular view. "Nice place." Richard gave a small smile. "It serves its purpose." He gestured to a table set for two. "I thought we might talk over dinner." They sat down, and a server immediately appeared with a salad course. Sarah had no appetite but picked at her food anyway, waiting for Richard to begin the conversation she had come for. Finally, after the server had left them alone with their main courses, Richard spoke. "I'm not sure where to start." "How about the beginning?" Sarah suggested. "How did you meet my mother?" Richard took a sip of his drink. "We met at Stanford. I was studying business and engineering. She was studying marine biology. It was the fall semester of 1994. I was rushing to class and literally ran into her, knocking her books everywhere." A genuine smile softened his features at the memory. "She called me an arrogant jerk and made me help her pick everything up. I asked her to coffee to apologize, and somehow that led to dinner, which led to us." Despite herself, Sarah was drawn into the story. This was more information about her mother than her father had ever shared. "We fell in love quickly," Richard continued. "She was brilliant, passionate about saving the oceans, and completely unimpressed by my family's money. By our second year together, I knew I wanted to marry her." His expression darkened. "But then your father entered the picture." Sarah tensed. "What do you mean?" James Mitchell was my roommate and best friend, Richard explained. He was studying mechanical engineering. The three of us became inseparable. Rebecca with her environmental causes, James with his plans to open an auto shop, and me with my dreams of expanding my family's company. Richard paused, his face clouding with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite identify. "What happened?" she prompted when the silence stretched too long. "I proposed to Rebecca in the spring of 1998, Richard continued. "I designed that ring for her, the one you're wearing. It has our initials hidden in the pattern." He gestured to Sarah's hand. R and R, for Rebecca and Richard. Sarah looked down at the ring she had worn for years, seeing it in a new light. The intricate gold pattern did indeed seem to contain subtle R shapes when you knew to look for them. "She said yes," Richard went on. "We planned a December wedding. James was going to be my best man." His voice hardened. "I never suspected that behind my back. They were falling in love." Sarah shook her head. "No, that can't be right. My dad would never—" "I caught them together." Richard cut her off, his voice sharp with old pain. "In our apartment, Rebecca crying, James holding her. When I confronted them, Rebecca admitted she couldn't go through with the wedding. She was in love with James." "That doesn't sound like my father," Sarah insisted. "Grief and betrayal change people, Sarah. That night, I got drunk, went driving in the rain. I crashed my car on the coastal road." Richard pushed back from the table and lifted the bottom of his sweater, revealing a deep, jagged scar running across his abdomen. "I spent 6 months in the hospital. By the time I got out, they were gone. Moved away without a word." Sarah's mind was spinning. "If what you're saying is true, why would they fake my mother's death? Why not just live their lives?" Richard's expression turned grim. "Because of what happened next. While I was in the hospital, my father used his influence to make life difficult for them. James couldn't get a job in his field. Rebecca was blacklisted from research positions. They fled to start over somewhere new." "That still doesn't explain the fake death," Sarah pressed. Richard looked away, out toward the glittering city lights. "No, it doesn't. And that's what's bothered me for 24 years. He turned back to Sarah, his eyes intense. "I've had private investigators searching for Rebecca on and off for years. Last month, one of them finally found something. A woman matching Rebecca's description, living under the name Catherine Lewis in Oregon." Sarah's heart began to race. "You think it's her? My mother?" "I don't know," Richard admitted. "But there's one way to find out." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table to Sarah. "A plane ticket to Portland. My private investigator can meet you there. Take you to the address where this woman lives." Sarah stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. "Why don't you go yourself?" A flicker of something, fear, guilt, passed across Richard's face. "Because she wouldn't want to see me. But you're her daughter. If it is Rebecca, she'd want to see you." "I still don't understand why you're doing this," Sarah said. "After all this time, why now?" Richard looked down at his hands. "When I saw you last night in the rain, helping a stranger with no expectation of reward, you reminded me of the person I used to be, before bitterness and revenge consumed me. When I saw that ring on your finger, I knew the universe was giving me a chance to make amends." Sarah finally reached for the envelope, turning it over in her hands. "What if it's not her? What if this is all some wild goose chase?" "Then you'll know I was wrong, and you can go back to your life," Richard said simply. "But what if it is her, Sarah? What if your mother is alive and out there?" The thought made Sarah's heart ache with longing. All her life, she had dreamed of having just one conversation with her mother. "The plane leaves tomorrow morning," Richard added. "I know this is sudden, but—" "I'll go," Sarah interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "I have to know the truth." Richard nodded, looking both relieved and nervous. "Of course, there's just one more thing you should know before you decide. He took a deep breath. Based on the information my investigator gathered, I believe Rebecca has been living under this false identity because she's afraid, not just of me or my family, but of someone else. Who? Sarah asked. I don't know, Richard admitted. But whoever it is, they're dangerous enough that your mother has been hiding for over 2 decades. By looking for her, you might be opening a door that was closed for good reason. Sarah thought of her father, his insistence on teaching her self-defense, his paranoia about locked doors and strange cars, the gun he kept hidden but made sure she knew how to use. Little things that had seemed like quirks, but now took on new meaning. I'm still going, she said firmly. I need answers. Richard studied her face. You have your mother's determination, he said softly, and your father's courage. As the evening wound down and Sarah prepared to leave, Richard walked her to her truck. Before she got in, he handed her a small box. What's this? She asked. Open it when you're alone, he said. It might help you understand. On the drive home, the box sat on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. Sarah could feel its presence, demanding her attention. When she finally reached her small rented house, she sat at her kitchen table and carefully opened it. Inside was a velvet pouch containing a ring, identical to the one she wore, except this one looked newer, less worn by time. A note accompanied it. The second ring. I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment. Be careful, Sarah. Trust no one, not even me. Sarah stared at the matching rings side by side on her table, symbols of a love story she never knew, and warnings of dangers she didn't understand. Tomorrow she would fly to Oregon in search of a mother she had thought was dead. Tonight, she would try to reconcile the father she knew with the man Richard had described. She picked up a framed photo of her father that sat on her bookshelf. James Mitchell in his shop apron, smiling proudly with his arm around teenage Sarah after she'd rebuilt her first engine. Dad, she whispered to the photograph. What really happened 24 years ago? As if in answer, her phone rang, making her jump. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Sarah's hand hovered over the phone, suddenly afraid. But her father had raised her to face her fears head-on. She answered. Hello? A woman's voice, soft and uncertain. Sarah? Sarah Mitchell? Sarah's heart stopped. Yes? Who is this? A pause, then. Someone who's been waiting a very long time to talk to you. Don't trust Richard Blackwood. Don't get on that plane tomorrow. The line went dead before Sarah could respond, leaving her staring at the 2 golden rings. Her world turned upside down for the second time in 24 hours. Sarah barely slept that night. The mysterious phone call played over and over in her mind. The woman's voice had sounded urgent, frightened even. But how had she known about the plane ticket? How had she gotten Sarah's number? By dawn, Sarah had made her decision. She would go to Oregon, but not on Richard's terms. She called Mike and asked him to watch the shop for a few days, citing a family emergency. Then she booked her own flight, not the one Richard had provided, and packed a small bag. Before leaving, she opened her father's old toolbox, the one he had specifically left to her in his will, with instructions never to get rid of it. Beneath the top tray of tools was a false bottom that Sarah had discovered shortly after his death. Inside was a sealed envelope with her name on it, a small handgun with a permit in her father's name, and $5,000 in cash. She had never opened the envelope, assuming it contained some sort of sentimental letter to be read when she was ready. Now, with trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found what I've hidden for you. I prayed you would never need any of this, but I've always prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. There are things about my past, about your mother, that I've kept from you. Not out of dishonesty, but out of love and a promise to keep you safe. Your mother's name was Rebecca Collins, not Elizabeth Mitchell. The woman whose grave you visited all these years was my sister, who died young from illness. Rebecca was the love of my life, but our story is complicated by choices we both made and dangers we never expected. If you're reading this, something has happened to make you question what you know, and it's time for the truth. Before you were born, your mother and I uncovered something dangerous, information that powerful people would kill to keep secret. We went into hiding, created new identities. When you were born, the danger found us again. Your mother made the hardest choice a parent can make. She left to keep us safe, to draw the threat away from you. She's alive, Sarah. Or at least, she was when I last heard from her 5 years ago. I've maintained the fiction of her death to protect both of you. If you're reading this, trust your instincts. Trust no one who suddenly appears with interest in our family. The gun is registered and legal. I taught you how to use it for a reason. The money should help if you need to travel or disappear quickly. There's a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box number 247. The key is taped to the back of this letter. Inside is everything you need to understand who is after us and why. I love you more than life itself. You have your mother's strength and my stubborn determination. You'll need both. All my love. Dad. Sarah wiped tears from her cheeks as she finished reading. Her father's words confirmed Richard's story about her mother being alive, but cast doubt on everything else. Who was telling the truth about what had really happened 25 years ago? She checked the back of the letter and found a small key taped there, just as her father had written. Sarah tucked the letter, key, and cash into her bag. After a moment's hesitation, she also took the gun, securing it properly according to the permit guidelines. Before heading to the airport, she made one stop, First National Bank. The bank manager was helpful once Sarah provided her ID and the key. He led her to a private room where he brought her the safety deposit box, then left her alone with it. Inside, Sarah found another envelope, this one thicker than the first. It contained old photographs. Her father and mother together, looking young and happy. There was a USB drive, several newspaper clippings, and a small notebook filled with her father's handwriting. The newspaper clippings caught her attention first. They were from 1998, all concerning Blackwood Industries. Blackwood Industries under investigation for environmental violations. Whistleblower claims Blackwood dumped toxic waste in protected waters. Blackwood CEO denies knowledge of illegal dumping. Sarah's heart raced as she connected the dots. Her mother had been studying marine biology. These articles were from right around the time her parents had supposedly betrayed Richard. She opened the notebook and began to read her father's cramped handwriting. March 12, 1998. Rebecca came to me today, upset about something she discovered at work. She's been doing research on an isolated coastline where Blackwood has a factory. The marine life is dying, and she's found evidence of chemical dumping. She's going to report it, but she's afraid of the consequences. March 30th. Rebecca showed her findings to Richard. He promised to investigate personally. She wants to believe him, but something doesn't feel right. He's been acting strange, distant. April 15th. Rebecca found documents proving Frederick Blackwood, Richard's father, approved the dumping. Millions in company money spent to hide it. When she confronted Richard, he denied knowing, but she saw the recognition in his eyes. He knew. May 2nd. Rebecca is scared. She's been receiving threatening phone calls. Someone broke into her apartment yesterday. Nothing taken, but her research was scattered everywhere. A warning. June 10th. Richard proposed tonight. Rebecca said yes, but her heart wasn't in it. She thinks staying close to the Blackwoods is the only way to gather enough evidence to stop them. I'm worried about her. The entries continued, painting a very different picture than Richard had described. According to James's notes, he and Rebecca had been working together to gather evidence of the Blackwoods' environmental crimes. Their growing feelings for each other had been complicated by guilt over Richard, who had been James's friend. The final entries were the most disturbing. November 8th. We have everything we need now. Hard evidence of 20 years of illegal dumping, bribes to officials, and cover-ups. Rebecca finally told Richard she can't marry him. We're taking the evidence to the EPA tomorrow. November 9th. Richard found us at my apartment. He was drunk, enraged. He threatened Rebecca, said his family would destroy us. He stormed out, and an hour later, we heard he'd crashed his car. November 10th. Frederick Blackwood came to the hospital today. Not to see his son, but to threaten us. He knows about the evidence. Said if we go public, we won't live to see the case go to court. We have to run. Sarah sat back, her mind reeling. If her father's account was true, then Richard had lied about nearly everything. It wasn't a love triangle that had torn them apart. It was Rebecca and James uncovering the Blackwoods' crimes. She quickly plugged the USB drive into her phone. It contained scanned documents, photographs of industrial waste being dumped into the ocean, internal memos discussing how to hide the evidence, and a video. Sarah's hands trembled as she played the video. It showed her mother, younger than in the pictures with Richard, but unmistakably the same woman, standing on a rocky beach. Dead fish and birds littered the shore behind her. "This is the third site I've documented," Rebecca said to the camera. "The chemical analysis shows high levels of mercury, cadmium, and proprietary compounds from Blackwood's manufacturing process. These chemicals are banned for a reason. They cause birth defects, cancer, and neurological damage. They're killing this ecosystem, and they could harm people in nearby communities." The camera panned to show the coastline, then zoomed in on pipes extending from a distant facility to the water. "If anything happens to me," Rebecca continued, looking directly into the camera, "this evidence needs to reach the EPA and the press. The Blackwoods aren't the only ones involved. There are government officials taking bribes to look the other way. This goes all the way to—" The video cut off abruptly. Sarah checked her watch. Her flight would be leaving in 2 hours. She quickly gathered everything, returned the safety deposit box, and headed to the airport, her mind racing. Richard had lied to her. But why reach out now, after all these years? Why direct her to her mother? None of it made sense. As she waited to board her flight, Sarah's phone rang. The unknown number again. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Sarah, listen carefully," the woman's voice said. "I know you're at the airport. I know you've been to the bank." Sarah tensed, looking around the terminal. "Who are you? How do you know these things?" "I have people watching you. For your protection," the woman said. "Richard Blackwood is not who he claims to be. The man nearly destroyed your parents' lives once before." Are you my mother?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A pause. "Yes. I'm Rebecca, and I've been waiting 24 years to speak with you. But not like this. Not with you walking into danger." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why should I believe you? Why should I believe anyone at this point?" "Because I can tell you things only your mother would know," the woman said. "You have a small birthmark shaped like a heart on your left hip. When you were born, you didn't cry. You just looked around curiously, taking in the world. Your father called you his little observer from the first day." These were details Sarah had never shared with anyone. Details only her parents could know. "If you're my mother, why stay away all these years?" Sarah asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "To keep you safe," Rebecca answered, pain evident in her voice. "The Blackwoods never stopped looking for me, for the evidence I had. As long as I stayed away, you and your father were safer. He understood that." "Dad's gone now," Sarah said softly. "I know," Rebecca replied, her voice breaking. "I wanted to come to the funeral, but it was too dangerous. The fact that Richard has found you now, only a year after James is gone. It's not a coincidence, Sarah." "What does he want?" "The evidence. James and I split it between us for safety. Richard must think you have my half now." Sarah thought of the USB drive and documents in her bag. Maybe I do. Listen to me, Rebecca said urgently. Get on your flight, but don't go to the address Richard gave you. It's a trap. When you land in Portland, take a taxi to the Harborview Hotel, room 512. I'll be waiting. How do I know this isn't the trap? Sarah asked. She could hear her mother's sad smile in her voice. You don't, but you're James Mitchell's daughter. Trust your instincts. The call ended as Sarah's flight was called for boarding. Her mind was made up. She would go to Oregon, but she would be careful. Very careful. Portland was rainy and gray when Sarah's flight landed. She turned on her phone to find 3 missed calls from Richard. She ignored them and hailed a taxi outside the terminal. The Harborview Hotel, please, she told the driver, watching carefully to see if anyone seemed to be following her. The hotel was modest but clean, located near the waterfront. Sarah paid the driver and entered the lobby, scanning for anyone suspicious. Satisfied that she wasn't being watched, she took the elevator to the 5th floor. Room 512 was at the end of the hallway. Sarah stood outside the door, her heart pounding. Her mother, if it really was her mother, was on the other side. After a lifetime of thinking she was dead, after 24 years of visiting an empty grave, Sarah was about to meet her. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. Caution made her step to the side of the door rather than stand directly in front of it. "Mom?" she called softly. "It's Sarah." The door opened slowly. A woman stood there, in her 50s, with silver threading through her once dark curly hair and the same eyes that Sarah saw in the mirror every day. "Sarah," Rebecca whispered, tears filling her eyes. "My baby." For a moment they just stared at each other. Then Rebecca stepped back, gesturing for Sarah to enter the room. The hotel room was simple but had 2 beds and a small sitting area. On the table were spread photographs, documents, and a laptop, similar to the evidence Sarah had found in her father's safety deposit box. "I know you have questions," Rebecca said, closing and locking the door behind them. "So many questions, and I owe you so many answers." Sarah set down her bag, suddenly unsure what to do or say. This woman, her mother, was both a stranger and the most familiar person in the world. "Why?" was all Sarah could ask. "Why leave me?" Rebecca's face crumpled with pain. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But the Blackwoods, they're dangerous people, Sarah. Frederick Blackwood threatened to hurt you if we exposed what his company had done. We thought if I disappeared with half the evidence while James raised you quietly under a new name, you'd both be safe." "But why the fake death? Why let me grow up thinking you were dead?" Sarah pressed. Rebecca sat on the edge of one of the beds, gesturing for Sarah to sit in the chair across from her. "That was your father's idea. He thought a dead woman would be harder to find than a missing one. And he thought it might be easier for you to have a mother who died than one who abandoned you." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. "It wasn't easier." "I know," Rebecca said softly. "I know that now. I've watched you from afar all these years, your graduations, your first day running the shop on your own. Always from a distance, always careful not to be seen." "You were there? All those times?" Sarah asked, stunned. Rebecca nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I missed so much, but I saw what an amazing woman you've become. Your father did a wonderful job raising you." "He never stopped loving you," Sarah said. "He never even dated anyone else." Rebecca wiped at her tears. "And I never stopped loving him. Or you." Sarah looked at the evidence spread across the table. "So what happens now? Richard knows where I am. He knows I've seen the evidence." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Richard has spent 25 years cleaning up his company's image. His father died 10 years ago, and Richard has been careful to present himself as an environmental advocate, a philanthropist. But underneath, the corruption continues. If this evidence goes public now, everything he's built would collapse. But why reach out to me at all? Sarah asked. Why not just, I don't know, have me killed if I'm such a threat? Because he doesn't know exactly what evidence we have or where it all is, Rebecca explained. James and I were careful. We made copies, hid them in different places. Richard has spent years trying to track down every piece. So he's using me to find you, and through you, the rest of the evidence, Sarah concluded. Rebecca nodded grimly. Yes, and now that he's found you, we're both in danger. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. Richard's number. She showed the screen to her mother. Answer it, Rebecca said. Put it on speaker. Sarah did as she was told. Hello? Sarah? Richard's voice sounded concerned. Where are you? My driver was supposed to meet you at the airport. I decided to make my own arrangements, Sarah said carefully. That's not safe, Richard said. Portland isn't your territory. Let me help you find your mother. Sarah looked at Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly. Actually, I already found her. A long silence followed. When Richard spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming colder. I see. And I suppose she's filled your head with lies about me and my family. She showed me evidence, Sarah replied. Evidence my father preserved all these years. Evidence? Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. Old documents that can be explained in context? A video of a naive young researcher jumping to conclusions? Your mother never understood the complexities of what she found. Chemical dumping that causes birth defects seems pretty straightforward to me, Sarah shot back. Business is rarely straightforward, Sarah, Richard said, his voice hardening further. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good. My father made mistakes, yes, but the company employs thousands of people whose livelihoods would be destroyed if these ancient allegations resurface. They're not allegations if we have proof, Sarah said. Let me talk to Rebecca, Richard demanded. Rebecca took a deep breath and moved closer to the phone. Hello, Richard. It's been a long time. 25 years, he said softly. You haven't changed, have you? Still the righteous crusader, willing to destroy lives for your principles. The only lives I see at risk are the ones your family's chemicals poisoned, Rebecca replied. Always so dramatic, Richard said dismissively. Look, we're all adults now. We can resolve this like reasonable people. I have a proposition for both of you. Sarah and Rebecca exchanged wary glances. I'm listening, Rebecca said cautiously. $10 million, Richard said. $5 million each, in exchange for all copies of the evidence and your permanent silence. You can have the money within an hour, enough for both of you to live comfortably for the rest of your lives. Sarah's eyes widened at the amount. It was more money than she could imagine, enough to save her shop, pay off all her debts, and never worry about money again. Rebecca's expression remained stony. Some things aren't for sale, Richard. The truth isn't for sale. Everyone has a price, Richard insisted. Think about it, Rebecca. Think about your daughter, the shop she's struggling to keep afloat, the life she could have. Don't bring me into this, Sarah warned. But you are in this, Richard countered. You've been in it since birth. Don't you deserve some compensation for what you've lost? For growing up without a mother because of my father's actions? Sarah hesitated. The money would solve so many problems. But looking at her mother's face, she knew some costs were too high. No deal, she said firmly. Richard sighed heavily. I was afraid you'd say that. Such a shame. You really are your mother's daughter. His voice turned icy. I tried to be reasonable. Remember that. The line went dead. Rebecca immediately jumped up. We need to leave. Now. What? Why? Sarah asked, alarmed by her mother's sudden panic. Because Richard now knows we're together and that we won't take his money, Rebecca explained, already throwing items into a bag. That makes us a problem with only one solution. As if to emphasize her point, the fire alarm in the hotel suddenly began blaring. Rebecca froze, then moved to the window, carefully peering out. "Men in the parking lot," she reported grimly. "Not hotel security." She turned to Sarah. "We don't have much time. Grab your things." Sarah quickly gathered her belongings. "Where are we going?" Rebecca checked the hallway, then motioned for Sarah to follow her. "To find the one person who can help us bring down Richard Blackwood once and for all." As they hurried toward the emergency stairs, Sarah realized that in just 3 days, her entire world had been turned upside down. The father she thought she knew had led a double life. The mother she thought was dead was very much alive. And the chance encounter with Richard Blackwood on a rainy night had set in motion events that might now cost them everything. Yet running down those stairs, following the mother she had only just found, Sarah felt something unexpected. A sense of purpose and clarity. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just James Mitchell's daughter trying to keep his legacy alive. She was Rebecca Collins's daughter too, fighting for truth and justice against powerful forces. And she was ready for the battle ahead. Sarah and Rebecca raced down the emergency stairwell, the fire alarm still blaring throughout the hotel. Other guests, confused and annoyed, moved slowly, but the two women weaved through the crowd with urgency. "This way," Rebecca whispered, grabbing Sarah's arm as they reached the ground floor. Instead of following the other guests toward the main exit, Rebecca led Sarah through a service corridor and out a back door that opened into an alley. "How did you know about that exit?" Sarah asked, breathless. "I've been running for 25 years, Rebecca replied. "I always know every escape route." She peered around the corner of the building. "My car is in the back lot. If we're lucky, they'll be watching the front." They weren't lucky. As they crept along the side of the building, 2 men in dark suits appeared at the entrance to the parking lot. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the telltale bulge of weapons under their jackets. "Blackwood's security team," Rebecca murmured. "Professional, dangerous, and very well paid." Sarah felt her heart racing, but forced herself to stay calm. "What's the plan?" Rebecca's eyes scanned their surroundings. "We need a distraction." Sarah spotted a pile of empty bottles near a dumpster. Without hesitation, she grabbed several and threw them hard against the opposite wall of the alley. The glass shattered loudly, drawing the attention of the 2 men, who immediately moved to investigate. "Now," Rebecca whispered, and they sprinted across the parking lot to a modest blue sedan. Rebecca unlocked it with a remote, and they jumped inside. "Stay down," she instructed as she started the engine and drove casually out of the lot, heading in the opposite direction from where the men had gone. Once they were a few blocks away, Sarah sat up. "Where are we going?" "To meet someone who's been building a case against Blackwood Industries for years," Rebecca explained, constantly checking the rearview mirror. "A federal prosecutor named Daniel Chen. He's part of a task force investigating corporate environmental crimes." "Why haven't they moved against Richard before now?" Sarah asked. Rebecca sighed. "Lack of evidence. Richard learned from his father's mistakes. He's more careful, covers his tracks better. What we have might be the missing piece Chen needs." They drove for nearly an hour, leaving Portland behind and heading west toward the coast. Eventually, Rebecca turned onto a narrow road that wound through dense forest until they reached a small cabin overlooking the ocean. "Chen's weekend place," Rebecca explained as they got out of the car. "Off the grid, no address on file. We'll be safe here for now." A man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair was waiting on the porch. He nodded at Rebecca and studied Sarah with interest. "So this is the daughter," he said, extending his hand. "Daniel Chen. I've heard a lot about you." Sarah shook his hand, surprised. "You have?" "Your mother has kept tabs on you all these years," Chen explained. "She's very proud of you." Inside the cabin, Chen had a makeshift office set up. Laptops, files, and bulletin boards covered with photographs and documents, many featuring Richard Blackwood. I've been after Blackwood Industries for 5 years, Chen told Sarah as they settled around a small table. They've dumped illegal chemicals at 12 different sites that we know of, but the company is like a hydra. Cut off one head and 2 more appear. Richard has politicians, judges, and regulators in his pocket. We have evidence linking him directly to at least 3 of the dumping sites, Rebecca said, pulling out the USB drive from her bag. Sarah did the same with the one from her father's safety deposit box. Chen's eyes lit up as he examined the contents. This is exactly what we need, the connection between the dumping and the corporate leadership. With this, we can get warrants, subpoenas. He looked at them seriously. Are you both willing to testify? Rebecca hesitated, looking at Sarah. It would mean coming out of hiding, facing Richard directly. I'll do it, Sarah said without hesitation. My father kept this evidence safe for 25 years. I'm not backing down now. Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand, pride and worry mingling in her expression. Then we do this together. Chen nodded. I'll make the calls. By tomorrow morning, we'll have federal agents ready to move. In the meantime, you both need to rest. It's been a long day. Sarah hadn't realized how exhausted she was until Chen mentioned rest. The events of the past few days, discovering her mother was alive, learning the truth about Richard, fleeing from his men, had drained her completely. Rebecca showed her to a small bedroom. Try to sleep. We're safe here. As Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, she looked up at the mother she was just getting to know. Why didn't you ever contact me, even after I was an adult? Rebecca sat beside her. I wanted to, every day, but as long as Richard was still searching for me, coming near you would have put you in danger. She took Sarah's hand, running her thumb over the gold ring. Your father and I agreed. Your safety came first. Always. Did you love him? Sarah asked. Dad, I mean. Richard said you were having an affair. Richard twisted everything to fit his version of events, Rebecca interrupted. Yes, I loved your father. It wasn't an affair. Richard and I were already falling apart when James and I realized our feelings for each other. I was going to break off the engagement before we even discovered what Blackwood Industries was doing. Sarah nodded, processing this information. Dad never stopped loving you. He never even took off his wedding ring. Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. James was the best man I ever knew. Leaving you both was like cutting out my own heart. She touched Sarah's cheek gently. You have his strength, you know, and his moral compass. For the first time since this all began, Sarah felt a sense of peace. The parents she had known and the ones she was discovering were the same people, brave, principled, and loving. Get some rest, Rebecca said, standing. Tomorrow will be a big day. But tomorrow arrived sooner than expected. Sarah woke to urgent voices in the main room. Dawn was just breaking outside her window as she pulled on her clothes and hurried out. Chen was on the phone, his expression grim. How many? He was asking. And you're sure it was Blackwood's security team? He listened, then said, Keep me posted, before hanging up. What's happening? Rebecca asked. Someone leaked information about our meeting, Chen explained. Blackwood's men hit my office in Portland an hour ago. They took my files, my computer, everything related to the case. How did they know? Sarah asked. Chen's face darkened. I've been working this case for years. Blackwood could have informants anywhere. Police, federal agencies, my own office. Does that mean they know we're here? Rebecca asked, already moving to gather their things. Before Chen could answer, headlights swept across the cabin windows as vehicles pulled up outside. Too late, Chen said, moving to peek through the curtains. We've got company. Multiple vehicles. Sarah's heart raced as she joined him at the window. 3 black SUVs had parked in front of the cabin. Men in tactical gear were getting out, moving with military precision. Is it the police? Sarah asked hopefully. Chen shook his head. Private security, Blackwood's people. Rebecca was already heading for the back door. We need to go, now. Chen stopped her. There's nowhere to run. They've surrounded the cabin. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling for backup, but it will take time. A voice called from outside, amplified by a megaphone. Rebecca Collins, Sarah Mitchell. This is a private security team employed by Richard Blackwood. We know you're in there. Come out peacefully, and no one gets hurt. What do they want? Sarah whispered. The evidence, Rebecca replied grimly. And us? Silenced. Chen's face was grim. I've called for FBI backup, but they're at least 30 minutes out. The megaphone crackled again. You have 5 minutes to come out, or we're coming in. Sarah looked between Chen and her mother, fear and determination warring within her. What do we do? Before either could answer, another vehicle could be heard approaching. Through the window, they watched as a sleek black town car pulled up. The security team parted, and Richard Blackwood himself emerged, leaning on an ornate cane. He came personally, Rebecca whispered, surprise evident in her voice. Richard wants to handle this himself, Chen said. That's actually good for us. He won't want witnesses to whatever he does next. The megaphone crackled once more, but this time it was Richard's voice. Rebecca, it's been 25 years. Don't you think it's time we talked face to face? Come out. Bring Sarah. Let's end this like civilized people. Rebecca's hands clenched into fists. He wants to talk? Fine. Let's talk. Mom? No, Sarah protested. It's too dangerous. We need to buy time until help arrives, Chen agreed. And I think I know how. He pulled out the USB drives. These aren't our only copies. I uploaded everything to a secure server as soon as you showed them to me. If anything happens to us, the evidence goes public automatically. Sarah nodded, understanding the plan. So we tell Richard that, and he has to keep us alive at least until he figures out how to stop it. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Rebecca looked at her daughter with pride and concern. I don't want you out there with me. This is my fight. Our fight, Sarah corrected her. Dad protected this truth for 25 years. Now it's my turn. Rebecca couldn't argue with the determination in her daughter's eyes, the same determination she'd seen so often in James. They moved toward the door together, Chen hanging back with his phone, continuing to coordinate with federal authorities. As they stepped onto the porch, the morning sunlight illuminated Richard Blackwood. He looked older in the daylight, his face lined with years of stress and guilt, but his stance was still powerful, commanding. Rebecca, he called, his voice carrying across the space between them. Still beautiful after all these years. Still a criminal, Rebecca replied evenly. What do you want, Richard? The same thing I wanted yesterday, the evidence, and your silence. His gaze shifted to Sarah. Both of you. It's too late for that, Sarah said. The evidence has already been uploaded to a secure server. If anything happens to us, it goes public immediately. Richard's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened on his cane. You're bluffing. Am I? Rebecca challenged. You know me, Richard. I've spent 25 years staying one step ahead of you. Do you really think I wouldn't have a backup plan? Uncertainty flickered across Richard's face. Even if that's true, I can still make things very difficult for both of you. Witnesses disappear. Stories get discredited. Are you prepared for that kind of battle? Yes, Sarah said firmly. We are. Richard studied her for a long moment. You have your mother's fire, he said finally, and your father's stubbornness. Thank you, Sarah replied, taking it as a compliment. Richard sighed, suddenly looking tired. 25 years, Rebecca. 25 years I've been looking for you. Do you know why? The evidence, Rebecca answered immediately. No, Richard said softly. Because I never stopped loving you. Rebecca's stance stiffened. Don't you dare try that now. It's true, Richard insisted. Yes, I wanted the evidence destroyed. Yes, I was angry. But most of all, I wanted to explain. To make you understand. Understand what? Rebecca demanded. That you were willing to poison communities, destroy ecosystems, all for profit? That I was trapped. Richard's composed facade cracked, revealing raw emotion beneath. My father held all the power. When you showed me what was happening, I was horrified too. But he threatened to disown me, to destroy James's career, to ruin you if I didn't fall in line. So you chose money over doing the right thing, Sarah said. Richard flinched at her direct accusation. I chose survival the only way I knew how. And then I lost everything that mattered anyway. You, Rebecca? My best friend, my soul. You expect us to believe this? Rebecca asked skeptically. No, Richard admitted. I don't. But it's the truth. When I took over after my father died, I tried to change things, clean up our practices, make amends. While continuing to hide past crimes, Chen called from the doorway, while threatening and bribing to keep the truth buried. Richard looked at Chen with narrowed eyes. The prosecutor. I should have known you'd be involved. He turned back to Rebecca and Sarah. I came today to make one final offer, not money this time, something more valuable. We're listening, Rebecca said cautiously. A confession? Richard said, shocking all of them. I'll admit to everything. The dumping, the cover-up, my father's involvement and mine. I'll take full responsibility. For a moment, no one spoke. The security team exchanged confused glances. Why would you do that now? Sarah finally asked. Richard looked at her with sad eyes. Because seeing the daughter Rebecca had with James, I realized some debts can never be paid with money. Some redemption requires truth. He turned to Rebecca. You were right all those years ago. I was wrong. And I've lived with that knowledge every day since. Rebecca seemed stunned by this admission. You're serious? Completely, Richard confirmed. My lawyers are drawing up a full confession as we speak. All I ask is the chance to turn myself in rather than be arrested, to maintain that small shred of dignity. Chen stepped forward. That can be arranged if you're truly cooperating. Richard nodded. Call off your security team, he instructed into a small radio. The men immediately began to stand down, returning to their vehicles. Why now? Rebecca pressed. After all these years of hunting me, why surrender? Richard's gaze moved between Rebecca and Sarah. Because I'm dying. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And I don't want to die with this weight on my conscience. His eyes lingered on Sarah. When I saw you helping me in the rain that night, not knowing who I was, showing kindness to a stranger, it broke something in me, made me realize what kind of legacy I was really leaving. Sarah didn't know how to respond. This man had caused her family so much pain, had kept her from her mother for her entire life. Yet standing before them now, he looked small, diminished by his own choices. I can't give you back the years you lost, Richard continued, but I can give you your lives back now. No more running, no more hiding. And the truth, finally, about what my company did. In the distance, sirens could be heard approaching. Chen's backup was almost there. It seems we have a deal, Chen said, stepping forward. You'll come with me voluntarily to make your statement? Richard nodded, then turned to Rebecca one last time. For what it's worth, I am sorry. For everything. Rebecca's face remained impassive, decades of anger not easily dispelled. Your apology doesn't change the past, Richard, but your confession might help the future. That's something. As federal agents arrived and took Richard into custody, Sarah stood beside her mother, watching the man who had shaped both their lives being led away. Is it really over? She asked quietly. Rebecca put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. This part is. Now we get to start the next chapter. 3 months later, Sarah wiped grease from her hands as she finished working on a customer's engine. The bell above the shop door jingled, and she looked up to see Rebecca walking in, carrying lunch. "Busy morning?" Rebecca asked, setting the food on a workbench. 3 oil changes, 2 brake jobs, and Mrs. Henderson's mysterious engine noise that turned out to be a plastic toy her grandson shoved into the air vent, Sarah replied with a smile. Life had settled into a new normal since Richard's confession. The story had made national headlines. Billionaire CEO confesses to decades of environmental crimes. Richard had been true to his word, providing authorities with detailed information about all of Blackwood Industries' illegal activities and the officials who had been bribed to look the other way. Richard himself was serving house arrest while awaiting trial, his health deteriorating rapidly. His confession had included a public apology to Rebecca and Sarah, as well as substantial financial restitution to the communities affected by the chemical dumping. Rebecca had used part of that money to become a partner in Mitchell's Auto Repair. The shop was thriving now, expanded with new equipment and 2 additional mechanics. Sarah still did most of the hands-on work herself, but having her mother's business acumen had helped turn things around financially. But more important than the business was the relationship they were building. 25 years of separation couldn't be erased overnight, but each day brought them closer. Rebecca had rented a small house just a few blocks from Sarah's, giving them both space while remaining close. "I heard from Chen this morning," Rebecca said as they sat down to eat. "Richard gave his deposition yesterday. Doctor says he probably only has a few weeks left." Sarah nodded solemnly. She had complex feelings about Richard, the man who had caused so much pain but ultimately chosen truth in the end. "Have you thought about visiting him?" Rebecca asked carefully. "He's asked about you several times." Sarah had been wrestling with this question for weeks. "I think I will," she said finally. "Not for him. For closure." Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." That evening, Sarah drove to Richard's mansion. Security was minimal now, just a nurse and a caretaker. She was led to a sunroom where Richard sat in a wheelchair, a blanket over his legs despite the warm weather. He looked much thinner than when she'd last seen him, his once commanding presence diminished by illness. "Sarah," he said, his voice weaker but his eyes lighting up. "I didn't expect you to come." "Neither did I," she admitted, taking a seat across from him. "How's the shop?" he asked. "Good, busy." "And your mother?" "Adjusting. We both are." Sarah studied him carefully. "She told me you've been asking about me." Richard nodded. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately, about what we leave behind." He gestured to a small box on the table between them. "I wanted you to have this." Sarah opened the box to find a small golden key. "What is it for?" "A safety deposit box at First National Bank. Box 416. Richard smiled faintly at her surprised expression. "Not everything I did was wrong. I've been anonymously supporting environmental research for 15 years, trying to undo some of the damage my company caused. The box contains details of the foundation I've established. I'd like you and Rebecca to serve on its board, guide its future." Sarah was speechless. This was the last thing she had expected. "Why us?" she finally asked. "Because you both care about the truth, because you fight for what's right, no matter the cost." Richard's hands trembled slightly as he reached for a glass of water. "And because I owe your family more than I can ever repay." Sarah helped him with the water, noticing the wedding band he still wore, the match to her mother's ring that now resided in Sarah's jewelry box. "I'll talk to Mum about it," she said. Richard nodded gratefully. "There's something else I want to ask you, something personal." Sarah waited, curious despite herself. "Tell me about James," Richard said softly. "About the man he became." "We were best friends once, before..." Everything. I'd like to know how his life turned out." Sarah hadn't expected this request, but as she looked at the dying man before her, she found herself wanting to answer. For the next hour, she told Richard stories about her father, his patience, his humor, his unwavering moral compass. How he'd taught her to change oil before she could ride a bike. How he'd supported her dream of taking over the shop when other parents might have pushed their daughters toward different careers. As she talked, she realized she was healing something in herself too. The grief of losing her father, the shock of finding her mother, the anger at the lies, all of it was slowly transforming into a new understanding of her family's complicated history. When it was time to leave, Richard thanked her. "You gave me a gift today, Sarah. Peace about an old friendship. Thank you." Sarah nodded, surprised to find tears in her eyes. "Goodbye, Richard." 1 week later, Sarah stood between Rebecca and Daniel Chen at Richard Blackwood's funeral. It was a small, private ceremony. Richard's choice. In his final days, he had continued to provide evidence against former associates and corrupt officials, ensuring that justice would continue even after he was gone. As they walked away from the gravesite, Chen said, "It's not often we see someone like Blackwood have such a complete change of heart. Makes you wonder what might have been if he'd made different choices 25 years ago." Rebecca slipped her arm through Sarah's. "We can't change the past, but we can build a better future." Sarah thought about the environmental foundation she and her mother were now responsible for, the shop they were building together, and the relationship they were reclaiming day by day. "Speaking of the future," she said, "I'm thinking of expanding the shop again. There's a vacant lot next door. We could add a training program, help kids learn a trade." Rebecca smiled proudly. "Your father would love that idea." As they walked to their cars, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in a window. For a moment, she saw both her parents in her face. Her mother's eyes, her father's smile. She wore her father's watch on one wrist and her mother's bracelet on the other. The gold ring that had started this entire journey was now on a chain around her neck, a reminder of the past, but no longer a mystery. 25 years of secrets had finally come to light. A circle that began with a chance encounter on a rainy night was now complete. Sarah had lost one parent but found another, and in the process discovered her own strength and purpose. As she drove away from the cemetery, Rebecca beside her and the future ahead, Sarah knew that some journeys end exactly where they need to, not where you expected, but where you belong.